Well, it's now time we go straight to the dailies. And what better way for us to start off the week than looking at what the papers have for us today? 7 papers is what we'll be reviewing. We have The Punch, The Vanguard, The Guardian, as much as Nigerian Tribune, The Nation, Daily Sun, and also the Daily Trust. But you trust I always enjoy to start with The Punch newspaper and see what it has as a major one on its front page. On The Punch this morning, the lead story reads, Saturday deadline puts parties under pressure. We're still talking about the 2027 candidates. As party rush to submit presidential National Assembly nominees ahead of INEC Saturday deadline. APC uploads Kwara, Yobe, Imo governors, Senate nomination forms. And PDP submit nomination forms for over 200 candidates. Large number, but I'll tell you to get more of it on page 2. But let's see if we take some other leading ones. Still on the front page of The Punch. Killings. Federal government wants South African, threatens tough action. Is a major one on page 8. ICPC recovers 5.8 billion naira cash in 6 months. And you can get that story up on page 8. Federal government secures $11.4 billion World Bank loans in 3 years. Wow, that's a huge number, but get more of it on page 4. The Senate meet Tuesday as fake agency budget row deepens. Well, anyway, forgive me for laughing, but get more of that story up on page 2. It's more like a drama that is unfolding. Nollywood, you say. Well, let's see if we take some other leading ones. Dangote beats US, ships 757 billion naira jet fuel to Europe. And this according to a report. Also on page 45, robbers kill Ondo technician defending family. That very sad story up is on page 4. And COAS, citizens key to winning security war, which is true. And you can get that story up on page 8. But the picture of the day is that of the Ekiti State Governor, Mr. Biodun Oyegbaji, doing a visit to the release kidnapped victims in Ekiti. And they were at the Ekiti State University, Ado Ekiti, and that played out just yesterday, Sunday. That's the much you can take from The Punch.
Let's check out stories making rounds on the Guardian newspaper this morning. And on the Guardian, the leading story reads, U.S. IPO drive tests Nigerians fintech's governance and compliance strengths is on page 6. U.S. pledge close scrutiny of 2027 polls amid CPC designation, also a major one on page 3. 8.8 trillion naira of budgets, Atiku Riwa seek proof as Obi demands Tinubu's resignation is on page 3. Report alleging 500 billion naira offer to split South Africa vote force in business. It's still on page 3. Let's see if we can get more of the leading stories on the front page of the Guardian newspaper. Let fuel prices reflect present market realities. It's a major one on page 16. Rep urged suspension of NYSC reforms for wider consultation. Still on page 8. PFIPC, pressure mount for independence probe and answers. You can get more of that on page 6. COAS assures ongoing operation to rescue Oyo abductees is on page 5. Oil major spill 125,000 barrels pollutes Niger Delta. Is a major one on page 7. Lawmakers calls for calm as fresh Taraba attack claims 3 persons. Is a disturbing one on page 8. Federal government condemns killing of 2 Nigerians in South Africa and 1 in Cote d'Ivoire. Is on page 4. And this picture of the day is more of a graphic representation of the lead story. That's much we can take on the Guardian this morning.
Well, let's quickly run to the Nation and see what the Nation can offer us today as we run through the dailies. Xenophobia. Nigerian takes hard stance against South Africa. And a follow-up to that, as federal government issues warning over killings, African trade chief, continent integration certainly at risk. But I'll tell you, don't risk yourself, but get more of that story up on page 2. And Dangote Group to spend 3 trillion on 12 federal roads under tax credit. Wow, it's a cheering one on page 6. Federal government, no 8 trillion extra budgetary spending is on page 10. But remember, we're looking at this critically later on Dialogue as we look at the controversy surrounding that 8 trillion naira has been indicated by the International Monetary Fund. Oririk victims, a rescue process on course, says Chief of Armed Staff on page 4. FX daily turnover nears $1 billion. Wow, in push for stronger Naira. And you can get more of that business side on page 19 of the Nation. Lalihen, Akala's wife, Akinwoke in Oyo APC Truth Panel is more of it on page 5. But let's see if we still take some other leading stories still on the front page of the Nation. The state chairman, Kalu Udom, orders rally support for Tinubu. And you can understand why that rally is if you read on the front page, but continue on page 3. Tinubu door-to-door movement begins nationwide mobilization. And page 3 has more of that story. And let's see, OAGF disapprove fake agency's CBN account. Well, anyway, that comedy or that Nollywood drama still continues on page 3. But the picture of the day, just like others, is that of the visit of the Ekiti State Governor to the rescued victims that were brought forth during the weekend. And honestly, you could just really pity them, how they've really emaciated. But anyway, we're happy they're having medical treatment and are going more rehabilitation. But that's the much you can take from the nation.
Still on Dailies, let's check out stories making rounds on the Nigerian Tribune. On the Nigerian Tribune, the leading story reads, IMF report on budget spending sparks debates as controversy trails claim of 8.8 trillion naira of budget spending. It is misleading, incorrect, no evidence provided according to federal government. 8.8 trillion naira expenditure is not budgeted. Tinubu should resign, says Obi. And you can get more of that on page 4. And still on the front page, let's look and get more of the leading story. Excuse me. Nomination list. NDC may run into crisis. Concourse block PRP mall alignment. We are working towards amicable resolution, according to party spokesman. It's on page 16. CBN target 2.2 trillion naira treasury bills issuance in July amid tight liquidity push. It's on page 14. Nigerians to pay more as green tax implementation begin at seaports. Wow, it's measure one on page 14. Let's see if we can get more of the leading stories still on the front page of the Nigerian Tribune. Ocean 2026, don't sell your PVC. APC governorship candidate tells electorate. You can get more of that on page 16. Ghost agency, how controversial DG lived in Oyo Palace, got disowned by late monarch. It's a major one on page 17. And on health, early menopause may raise lifetime heart disease risk by 40% according to study. Interested to get more of that on page 4. High interest rates, credit crunch remain disincentive to private sector investments as manufacturers grapple with 35% borrowing cost, 1.92 trillion naira credit squeeze. MAN calls for implementation of 1 trillion naira manufacturing stabilization plan, convert macroeconomic gains into inclusive growth. CPPE urges federal government. It's a major one on page 13. And the picture of the day is that of the Ekiti State Governor during his visit to the released Eda Oyinbo kidnapped victims at the Ekiti State University Ado Ekiti yesterday. That's much we can take on the Nigerian Tribune.
The Daily Sun will definitely be the next paper for us to look at as we extra on the dailies this morning. And on the Daily Sun, again, federal government under fire over PFIPC scandal. Turaki-led PDP demands forensic probe, official suspension, scandal regular feature of Tinubu administration. I'm not saying so. Atiku is giving us that review. And Serap charges National Assembly to probe 1.3 billion allocation. And I'll tell you to allocate more of that story up on page 6 and 27 of the Daily Sun. Yes, Uzodinma Lords Tinubu National Assembly over State Police Bill addresses House of Lords, London on leadership. Is a major one on page 27. APC primaries fallout. Governors aggrieved aspirant trade blames as party fence meddling filters into key states. And I'll tell you to get more of that story up on page 8. Let's see if we still take some other leading story. Still on the front page of the Daily Sun. Nigeria faces $10 billion debt risks as banks favor government lending over businesses. And bias starving real sector of credit, says MPC official on page 25. 2026 global election. Don't sell your PVC. Oye Bamiji declares on page 28. Alleged 8.83 trillion in unbudgeted expenditure. Report false, misleading, says Oyedele. Tinubu must resign, says Peter Obi. Expert tax federal government on transparency. But I'll tax you to read that story up on page 2 and 26 of the Daily Sun. Nigeria, 8 others account for 83% of global gas flaring, worth about $54 billion, according to the World Bank. As Seplat ends gas flaring in its onshore operation begins LPG production. Well, quite cheering, but can they store and make the gas price reduce in Nigeria? Is one I feel you need to get more information on page 21 and page 27 of the Daily Sun. The picture of the day is that of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu and the Secretary of Relations to State and International Organization of His Holy Archbishop Paul Gallagher and also Apostolic Nucho of Nigeria. We're talking about Archbishop Michael Crotty and Minister of Foreign Affairs. We're talking about Bianca Ojukwu doing a visit to President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. Remember, it looks as if the Pope will be coming to Nigeria anytime soon. Just keep your fingers crossed. We'll be letting you know. But that's the much you can take from the Daily Sun.
Trust me, you're having a good time here on Dailies this morning as we look at Daily Trust newspaper. And on Daily Trust, the lead story reads, Amajiri Commission earmarks 8.4 billion naira for roads projects. Is a major one on page 3 and 4 of the Daily Trust. And still on the front page below the plate name, Phantom Council, push for independent probe roads is on page 7. Bandits killed 8, sacked 30 Sokoto communities is a sad one on page 6. Leaked audio on El-Rufai Stairs controversy in Kaduna is a major one on page 11. And still on the front page, let's look and get more of the leading stories. Federal government, opposition differ over alleged 8 trillion naira off-budget spending is on page 5. Final moment of Nigeria imprisoned in Cote d'Ivoire is a major one on page 8. Baoshi L's deputy governor's son, daughter died in auto crash.
Wow, that's sad.
Is a sad one on page 42. 67-year-old caregiver allegedly hides cocaine in plantain peels. Wow. Or you can get more of that on page 25. And let's quickly see the picture of the day. The picture of the day is that of cars damaged as trailer conveying firewood fell off-road along Jos Road, Lafia, Nasarawa State yesterday. It's really a sad one. And that is much we can get on the Daily Trust newspaper.
Well, anyway, the Vanguard will be next and last paper for us to quickly look at. And on the Vanguard this morning, how SGF office cleared Adeyemi for Canada summit. And we're still talking about the PFIPC controversy. Riders to follow, troubling pattern of scandals now too frequent, says article. Presidency can't escape accountability over Gbajabiamila claim, says PDP. Serap asks Akpabio Abbas to explain 1.3 billion allocation to fictitious PFIPC. And I'll tell you, it's not a fictitious story, but one you can read and get details more on page 5. Let's see if we take some other leading ones. Federal government denies spending 8 trillion outside budget. Remember, I'll be looking at that, but you can get it up on page 9. As Obi asked Tinubu to resign over spending. Zamfara will not negotiate with terrorists. Governor Lawan is telling us why on page 45. Oyosko abduction rescue operations ongoing, said the chief of armed staff on page 39. Insecurity soaring operational costs. Others stall ICT boom. And well, it is quite understandable, but I'll tell you to get more of it on page 11. Let's see if we take some other leading stories. Still the Vanguard we are. US to closely monitor 2027 polls as Congressman Raleigh Moore is telling us that on page 9. 2027 polls, parties rush to meet INEC's uploading deadline is on page 8. Xenophobia, federal government condemned killing of 2 Nigerians, demand justice. And you can get more of that justiciable story on page 6. NDLEA intercept Malaysia-born cocaine, now PhD student mastermind on page 6. Quite disturbing. But let's quickly make it a bit lighter with the Mr. and Mrs. column. Mrs. will always have her first say. There you go again, going out without giving your wife a hug or peck or kiss. You are leaving me without warmth. And husband say, after squeezing 250,000 naira from me, if you want warmth, drink tea. Well, anyway, 250 is enough to warm you up. But anyway, the picture of the day is that of the Ekiti State Governor as he visits those released or victims at the hospital at Ado Ekiti. And that played out yesterday. But that's the much we can take from the dailies all put together. It is always interesting and advisable that you go grab a copy of these papers, get more information as it contains most of the stories we've just highlighted on the front pages of the dailies this morning. And you'll be doing yourself a lot of favor. But more favor will come because definitely we'll be having dialogue as much as the news and other awesome programs to come up this platform. Let's go on a break. I'll come back to do more.